Well, welcome to another session. I hope you are well. I'm going to be speaking today about something that I think um, is needed. I'd like you to uh, leave a comment if you disagree, agree um, on what you hear. If you strongly and even vehemently object to what is shared, you can like or you can dislike. If you choose not to leave a comment, I would like to speak about the importance of understanding numbers. Uh, Success is a numbers game, and failure is a numbers game. The numbers keep a score. They generally speaking do not lie, and generally speaking, they are either neither um, there to tell you something or there to hold from you something. They just are. They leave to your interpretation, how you perceive or interpret their meanings. Now, it might seem as though I'm talking about something quite abstract. I am not. I'm going to bring this back full circle to relationships, and I'm going to ask you to think about a concept, something that is true. Now, in the UK, we have 67, roughly going on 68 million people, depending on how you choose to look at the entire country. We are separated into various smaller nations: England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Across the entire region, what we find is that roughly about 85% of the people live in England or reside in England. Scotland makes up about 13 or 12.5 or 13.1%. Then you have Wales making up about 4.5 to 5%, and then Northern Ireland making up about 1 to 2%. Here are some numbers, and this is where we begin today's conversation. If you were to look at the population, and you separated the population into two groups, male and female, in the entire country, there are about 2.4 million more women than there are men. In England, there are 1.2 plus about 1.21 more women than there are men. In Scotland, about 1.2 million, 1.2 plus more women than there are men. But irrespective of the location you go to, the nation, in every single area, the population of women exceed the population of men. Now you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with anything? So what? Well, within the game of life and the game of winning, we do not get what we deserve. Sadly, we do not always even get what we negotiate. We do not sometimes get what we work for. Sometimes we are dealt a hand despite actually paying the right prices and working hard and dutifully being good people. We're dealt a bad hand. The one thing that we both know, and everyone will agree to, is that life is about people. Life is about relationships, and that about 80% of our happiness will come from our relationships. The one aspect of our relationships that plays a significant role, considering in Great Britain or the UK, we're separated from what we used to be or have previously, which were small communities with people. Generally speaking, if you go back to the turn of the 20th century and prior to the 20th century, people generally lived within small villages, small communities, and small towns, and they stayed within their group. Perhaps not far from your house was your mother and your father, your siblings, and so there was this sense of cohesion and a community. Now, as we have globalized and as we have industrialized, we have pursued pastures beyond our initial area of, you might say, influence. So you can have somewhere like London, and in London you have about 11 million people in a small city. But it's not unusual to find that you live in a flat and there are other flats in the same building, but you do not know who your neighbours are. and you may have lived there for 10 years, because people come and go and the churn is quite high. Whereas if you were to go back to the smaller villages, you find a consistency amongst people who have always been there. Now, the reason for this is to simply say, most of our happiness, although will come from relationships, the majority of those will come from our intimate relationships. At the start of the century, 20th century, we go back to when we still had the Great Generation, and even going as far as the Silent Generation. The life expectancy between 1901 and 1945 was roughly about 42 years, if you were lucky. If you had a child, and you had 6 of them, about 4 out of the 6 died before age 11, for various reasons. So what you had was a success probability of about 30%, sometimes 20%, for them to live beyond age 15. Life expectancy was 40 plus, if you were lucky. Most people did not live long enough. Now today, thanks to technology, biology, development, innovation, we have extended the life expectancy of the average person from roughly 40 years plus at the turn of the century, 20th century, to where we have today. Today, the life expectancy for a woman is about 85, and a man, maybe about 79, 80 years. We're living longer. But we're leaving our community quite early. So at 16 and 18, most young boys have left their family and they've gone pursuing their passion. There isn't an indebtedness they normally would have had to their family and their local community. So from 16 to roughly, who knows, if he's lucky, to 86, he has 70 years. And in that 70-year period, assuming he gets married at say 35 or 36, from the point he gets married, he still has roughly 50 years. Therefore, most of the happiness, recognizing that at 16 he starts to make steps to leave the family. At 18, certainly most of the cases, he's gone. Most of his happiness will come from relationships he forges post-18, but fundamentally, his intimate relationships. So, who he chooses as a mate is the most important decision he will make. Now, we bring this full circle. If there are 2.4 more million women than there are men, and if we say we adjust for marriageable age, we exclude those who are 18 and below, and we also exclude those who you might say are 65 and above, perhaps who have lived and who perhaps are not looking to remarry for whatever reason. What we find is of the 2.4 million, roughly about half, say 60% of that, so roughly about 1.4 million more women, are of marriageable age. So if every single man who is of marriageable age, of 18 to 65, decided to get married, assuming everyone in that age group was not married, and every man chose a mate, there will be roughly in excess of 1.4 more women than there are men. And what this simply means that a strategy is needed. That strategy, based on the numbers, mean that there aren't enough men to go around. Now here's what's also interesting. Let's reverse that. Women, generally speaking, have a higher expectation of men. Of the men that are existing, perhaps women might be of the view, the majority of them, that only about 30% of those men are attractive enough. So despite having more women, they find fewer men to be attractive. Now let's play the numbers. Let's assume that there are 1.4 more million women and 1,000 men, or 1 million men to make it more interesting. 1 million, and there are 2.4 on one side. But of the million, women think only about 25 to 30% of those are attractive. So we say 250,000. So 250,000 men that are attractive to the majority of the women, and 2.4 million women. It's a numbers game. What it simply means is there aren't enough to go around. Therefore, one of the things that women have to be taught how to think of or consider is the numbers. I often use the saying, begin with the end in mind. Decide the lifestyle you like to lead, the life you like to experience. Identify what you wish to make that life beautiful, however you define it. Once you've defined it, recognize that that life has to be colored. The tapestry has to be designed by two people, you and the significant other. Consider what he might look like, what he might want from a mate. And therefore that allowed you to understand you already know what you want and what he has to bring to the table. But if you can walk a day in his moccasins, you might understand what he also wants. And you might start to move yourself towards becoming the person that he wants as he moves towards becoming the person that you deserve. Wherever you guys meet, you have something called a Venn diagram, where there's an intersection between who you are and who he is. And hopefully there's synergy. And he can meet what you are asking for, and you can meet what he is asking for. But if it is a numbers game, and if men have a lower standard when it comes to choosing a mate than women, the concepts of hypergamy exist. We have hypergamy, we have isogamy, and hypergamy. Men generally will marry across social economic hierarchies, isogamy, and below. Hypergamy. Women would marry across social hierarchies and economic hierarchies, isogamy, and hypergamy, going upwards. So you have hypergamy, hypo, iso. Preferentially, men do not really care about going up, although they gladly accept it. Women care more about going down. What this places is a burden, unnecessary burden, where men are open to whoever will have them. Women are closed to only a select few. So, if you are a woman, one of the questions to ask and answer is, how can you win the numbers game? Because it comes to a numbers game. One option could be, well, I don't have to be confined to the same geography. That's a good option, because you can go overseas. You can look beyond the island. One option could also be, well, I'm not really confined to particular types, whether it be in physical attributes or otherwise. So you can increase the pool. At the core, there will never be enough men to go around. And the ones that are the most attractive, of value, that you seek, there are other women who also want them. So I give something that I think is an important consideration. 5 steps. Number 1, identify the value exchange. Let's say you find that 20% of those men, what do you bring to the table that they bring to ensure you have a fair exchange? First. Number 2, you have to be able to determine, assuming you've identified them, you have to be able to determine where they are and get in proximity around them. Number 3, the major issue you will have is obscurity. People do not know you. And even though they see you, you're not memorable. So you have to get attention. And how you do that is entirely up to you. You might do it physically, but you might just be more of a pleasurable experience or memory. Value exchange, proximity, get attention. And once you've got attention, now you have to compete. Unfortunately, most women have been raised that they do not have to compete for a man. The women who compete and who know how to compete always win. They may not win immediately, but they win in the long run because they understand the rules of the game. You have to get out of your comfort zone and be seen. Parade yourself around so that you actually, through your presence and behavior and mannerism and attitude, you get attention. When you get his attention, there will be other women around him, considering he's in the top 20%, and there are more women of you than there are of him in that category. You have to compete. You compete using what I call your A, B, C, D, E, F, up to Z of your self-image. Your appearance and your attitude, your beauty and your behavior, your communication and your candor, your discipline. And that discipline is evident in how you look. Your discipline and your digital avatar, your emotional intelligence, your empathy, and F, fitness. friendliness, forgiveness. G, in many ways, gratitude, the softness that which you bring to life, your inspiration, I. And it goes on and on and on. But you're competing with other women on those attributes. When you compete and you attract them, the final part is retention. Retention, retention, retention. It's not what you attract, it's what you keep that matters. I should say that again. It is not what you attract or who you attract that matters, it's who you get to keep that matters. Now, if you were playing the numbers game, then it becomes very easy. The first rule of fishing is to go where the fish are. It becomes a numbers game. If there are 200, in this particular example, 50,000 men, the question is, where are they? Yes, they are spread across the whole UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and England, where a majority of them concentrated. That's where you go. And that's where you should be willing to go. Key question is, what are you willing to give to get what you want? And what are you willing to give up to get what you want? You're going to have to sacrifice to get what you want. Now, I've tailored today's session towards the female. But if we inverted that and we spoke to the men understand this. We are numbers, we're cost-benefit calculators. From our very nature, we have to learn how to attract a woman. So we understand the first rule of fishing is go where the fish is. We also understand women don't find 80% of us generally attractive. So we have to do things to raise our attractiveness to a level where we are even going to be tolerated or even entertained. Men do this constantly, which is why the burden of rejection is on the men. We play a simple game, pursue and persist. We go from no, and we hope we get to maybe, and maybe to yes. We do all of that because we understand that the burden of performance is on us, and that women have special gifts to have. But we do all of that when it comes to dating, which the real product of is sex and having a great time. But when it comes to relationship, recognizing that there are fewer of those men in the top 20% than there are women in the majority, the balance of power shifts because what we bring to the table is not symmetric. We're using and competing with two different sets of tools. And what we bring to the table, therefore, is not based on morality or value judgments, but is simply based on what each other wants and what the marketplace will tolerate. So as I close, let me encourage you to think about the following, if you are a woman. Anything worth having needs some sacrifice. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly until you get it right. Now, we were told anything worth doing is worth doing right. That's wrong. If you do not know how to do it, it's worth doing badly, and then you improve until you get it right. Success is a numbers game. To the victor goes the spoils. You don't have to lose the game of love and relationships. You just have to learn the rules of the game and play in good faith, peaceably, and with expectation. If you disregard all of what I've said so far, especially the last four, you play a game with numbers, and in many ways you're betting against the numbers. You move from being strategic in your approach to being hopeful. Happenstance and hope are no strategies for success. You have to be decisive, you have to be deliberate, you have to be determined, you have to make decisions, you have to have a destination you're traveling towards, and you must face the direction that leads you into and towards that destination. So I hope that's been useful.